Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. We don't have a lot of concrete news when it comes to updates and things like that for EVE Online. We do know that CCP is now planning for a Plex for Good drive for the Australian bushfires, so we'll see when they actually announce that. But normally, if it follows the same pattern as before, you basically get the opportunity to donate Plex to a special character, and all of those proceeds will then go towards, it's usually the Icelandic Red Cross, which can then in some way help in the situation there. We'll see, of course, as CCP actually comes out with information on that. We also know that next week patch day will not be on Tuesday but on Thursday. It's been delayed by 2 days, but that this will start the first quadrant for 2020 in EVE Online that is going to focus on PvP. So I am really curious once we get some updates on that, what this is all about, because right now, of course, we don't have a lot of information on what CCP is actually planning to do. And of course, the hype machine for FanFest is starting in full force at this point, so that's going to be early April 2020, and yeah, hopefully we get lots of information, the full roadmap, cool trailer, all of that good stuff is coming in the next few months. And you know, I'm really looking forward to any information that CCP gives us on what's coming next for EVE Online. As always, we'll take a quick look at the situation in the New Eden store, and we don't see any sales. We've got some bundles front and center, so if you want to get a couple of skins in the same for different ships but the same skins, you can definitely go for that, but I am not seeing any sales or anything like that right now. That means that we get to move straight to the market, and we will start with Plex coming in at 2 minutes 10. Like that, and yeah, it's quite a difference. You may already have seen it on the ticker. To my surprise, we actually have a decline in price. We're back below the 3.25 mark on the chart for the average prices. Slight uptick for the averages today, but you can clearly see that the 20-day moving average, which is the orange line here, is just basically steadily going down and is not stopping at the 3.25 mark. This is a very big surprise to me, especially with CCP announcing a Plex for Good drive. We're selling them at 3.2 million in JITA. Buyers are also just below 3.2 million, so that margin is very thin. I do think we're finally going to be landing on a low point. And then in the player-owned trade hubs, it's 3.3 million for the sellers, so just a couple of exceptional sellers over here, and also just below 3.2 million for the buyers. The good news is that if you want to be ready for Plex for Good, well, you can definitely grab them at a pretty low price. If you look on this chart right now, for close to 3 million isk, and I think it'll be in batches of 500, but of course I'm not really sure how all of that is going to work now that we'll have a Plex for Good drive with the new small Plex. This used to be 1 Plex for 30-month subscription, now it's 500 of them. Will you be able to donate 1 Plex, 100 Plex? I don't know, we'll have to wait for that, but I do expect demand to start to pick up for Plex itself. That is going to be not just for the Plex for Good drive, but also because FanFest is coming, and usually CCP does announce some cool stuff that you can do with Plex as well around that period. So we'll see if this is the right time to buy or not, but we are definitely at a 1-year low point. We're yet again below that 3.25 million mark, and I'm not seeing like a volume spike or anything like that that would correlate with this latest retraction, you could say, of the price, or with the fact that we're staying at this low point. It really is the market that is okay with the current situation. It's entirely possible that these volumes need a bit more time to be absorbed, but you can see from previous peaks and then the recovery of the price. So we get a peak in volumes here and here. You can see the recovery of the price is usually pretty quickly after that happens. So we'll see what this gives in the future. Next up, we have the multiple pilot train certificate. That one is basically flat as well, but in a different situation, well away from the 1 year low point. That was at the 1.3 billion ISK. It's now 1.5 billion and above. Let's see what it's actually selling for. 1.6 billion in JITA, and we are talking 1.6 billion in the player-owned trade hubs as well. Buyers are coming in at 1.5 and just above that. So that's a more normal situation, a decent margin, and here uptrend. No, it's really flat for the last couple of weeks here as well for the multiple pilot train certificate, but it is not at that year bottom price. After that, we have the skill extractors. These are doing the very same thing as plex, of course, because they have a one-on-one correlation. So basically also flat for the last couple of days, but at a really low point, less than 380 million ISK on the average, 368 million for the sellers, 356 million for the buyers. That is definitely, if we take a look at it like this on a 1 year chart, at that 1 year low point. If you're looking to invest in skill extractors, I think this is the right time to do so. This is basically the second or third time that I think we are hitting or getting close to hitting a bottom. At some point I'm gonna be right about that, and look at the upwards potential here, 500 million ISK in May. And then yeah, keep in mind April here we have another peak. While we didn't have a FanFest last year, I think that this was basically the start of the EV Invasion Tour. Yeah, keep in mind this is also where we'll have FanFest next year. So if this has any predictive capabilities, this could be very interesting, of course, starting here as well, and then April with another peak. It's always a bit of a gamble, but there are patterns to be seen from time to time as well. Next up, we have the skill injectors. Here are the large skill injectors that are basically hesitating as well, staying flat, not at a low point right here, but definitely below average, I would say, selling for 838 million, a little bit above that, and buyers are coming in at just above 800 million. Finally, a little bit of competition coming in. Let's see what it's like in the player-owned trade hubs. Yeah, 808 in the player-owned trade hubs, so demand is starting to pick up. We're starting to basically build a foundation on that 808 million ISK price range, but it is definitely still pretty cheap. These are, in my opinion, smart investments. People that still try to grab these for close to 800 million ISK. After that, we have these small skill injectors that are going back down towards 170 million ISK. That's a bit of a surprise metric. Normally large skill injectors, let's take a look at that one, and small skill injectors move very much in tandem. Here in the last couple of weeks we actually have different situations. So the small injectors, just shy of 170 million for the sellers, 160 million for the buyers, decent margin, and 160 million is right here, the very bottom of the chart yet again. I personally like the skill injectors as a longer term investment. You know, if you regularly listen to EVE Talk, you know this. It is made up of two parts. One part is basically the skill extractor and does plex, which means that it is an edge against inflation. It is going to protect you against inflation in the game, which is almost an inevitability in an online economy. Now with CCP, Chaos Era, what they're planning to do with resources, you never know, but that's generally the trend. And then the other part is actually a bit of speculation on the success of the game, because it is of course skill points, which when CCP comes out with new stuff, new ships, new skills to learn, will potentially see a speculative spike on top of that protection against inflation. I really like these for like longer term investments personally. And you can see that we also had a May peak at 220 million, for instance, for these small skill injectors. Finally, we've got our different items. The daily alpha injectors are trying to get back to that 40 million range here, and the sellers are getting above that, 42 million for them, 40 million for the first buyer as well, with 1,000 of them. So here I think that we're basically finally starting to get through these volumes from the CCP sales that have crashed the price down to 40 million ISK. Normal price 60 million actually for a daily alpha injector is not completely crazy. That's already a 50% markup just from the current range. So I would say that this is also potentially a place to invest in. It's also a much smaller in the amount of ISK that you need, 40 million compared to 160 or 800 million for the large scale injector. But keep one thing in mind, it is a different market. Number one, the purchases go directly from CCP, so this is created from thin air. Number two, this is only usable for alpha clones, so as a result it's a much smaller market. It is completely different. And now we still have the hypercores to look at, the new item for the Hypernet relay. This is just basically flat above 340,000. I don't suspect that this will, oh no, it's actually at 333,000 for the sellers and 327, super narrow margin. I don't expect too much volatility in this one. Unless CCP comes out with sales for the hypercore. I just think that CCP is well aware that there's part of the player base and part of the feeling that the Hypernet relay has is not necessarily positive. It is a gambling, there's definitely a gambling aspect to it as well, and as a result I think they're going to be very careful before they try to do stuff like sales on the hypercores and things like that. Which means that we get to move on to the mineral market, coming in at 1045. Let's get started on titanium, and that's because of that. Here's the 1 year chart, that's the one we want. Very nice recovery after climbing back to 650 on the announcement that CCP was going to look at the resource distribution, and on the announcement that in 00 feldspar, so titanium sources, had been removed. We had this nice spike up to 650. After that, an inevitable correction, presumably on an overreaction from the market. But no, look at that, we're right back here again. 650, we do have to put on the filter for gestation. 650 for the sellers, and the buyers are up to 628. That is a pretty good price for titanium, even historically speaking. This is actually well above average, so that makes your high-sec mining worth quite a little bit more than in the first half of the year, where we were constantly trading at the 4.5 mark, which was well below average and not a good price for titanium. During that period I always try to hoard my titanium personally, and looking for better opportunities. It's right here yet again. 650 is definitely a good price. Not a high point of 7 during the blackout or just before the blackout, but it's definitely there. Next up we've got pyrite, that had done a decent recovery over the first 10 months or so to climb from 3.5 ISK to 5 ISK, and is able to maintain that price range right now. 5.2 for the sellers, just below 490 for the buyers. 5 on average. Well, we're staying above that so far. A little bit of testing at the tail end here. We'll see how it evolves, of course. I think that honestly not that many speculators are jumping in on the market, so the supply demand is what it is for the economy at the moment, and that a lot of people are actually waiting for CCP to announce stuff, to put stuff on the test server before they decide which way these minerals will go, because we have been burned before, of course, when CCP last took a look at the resource balances and took a pass on the mining ships. It crashed prices to the current levels or even below that. After that we have the Mexalon market, that also recovered decently well, stopping just shy of 55 ISK. It's actually 57 for the sellers, but 51 for the buyers. So this is the average price, of course. It's back to the low end of the normal range. So I would say that if you have to turn your Mexalon into ISK, then you can definitely start to do so right now. With a little bit more patience, 60 would actually be the price that I would wait for personally. I think it is entirely possible that it will happen. It is already the natural bottleneck in 00 if CCP does decide to give a bit more of even more difference than just titanium between high sec and null sec, then this one could definitely see high points as well. It's a bit of speculation, but personally I think it could happen. After that we have got the isogen market, the worst performing mineral over the last couple of years. This stuff used to be worth a lot more than Mixelon was, and now look at it, trying to get back to 15 ISK, not able to defend that range. We are back on the downtrend, 1542 for the sellers, but 1340 for the buyers. Pretty wide margin that's opening up. This is just too easily oversupplied for the current production cycles in EVE Online. There's not much anyone can do about that. If it's just too easy, too abundant in New Eden, then nobody is going to pay a heavy price for getting isogen in their mix. That does keep stuff cheap, of course. Then we've got Noxium, which had a very similar chart to Mixelon, did it really well to maintain a price of 300 plus, I think it was, yeah, 300 plus over the first half of the year. Then as the Gnostic blackouts happened, basically they adapted. I think that they started to tap a lot more sources for Noxium and Mixelon from their moon mining activities, and this one has not recovered like Mixelon. Well, Noxium comes from a lot of different sources. It's even abundant in high sec in certain parts of space, and as a result it's not that easy to get that recovery going, because there's not that much of a need also to do the massive import. It's not as clear a bottleneck in production as Mixelon is. As a result, yep, slight recovery, but definitely well away from the previous ranges. 249 for the sellers and 231 for the buyers. Decent margins, so downwards potential as well here. After that we've got the Zydrine market, and here we are moving in an unexpected direction for the first time. We did slump to one low point of 450 right here in October, slight recovery, but back on that normal 500 ISK price range, and now for the first time a sudden breakout. 550 on the chart, 560 for the sellers and 510 for the buyers. Not sure exactly why this is happening. Perhaps someone is speculating on a CCP change in this regard as well, but it is pretty substantial. 10% increase here over the course of about a week, because last week we were just at the 500 range, and it's coming out of nowhere for me personally, especially when you look at the megasite chart that has basically not moved, at least not on the ticker. So let's go take a look at that one. These two minerals basically come from the same source at the moment, and so it's kind of strange as well to see them move in such different fashion. You've got Zydrine, for instance, with at least a decently strong first half of the year, even first 8 months, bit of a dip, but then trying to recover, and the megasite has basically been down for 11 months straight, starting in January, ending up in December at a low point of around 350, slowly recovering to 400, but it's basically very stable now. 403 for the sellers, 380 for the buyers, and it's usually the sellers that win out. Well, actually it's in between the two. So yeah, we're at that megasite has found its price range, and we actually see some surprise volatility in the Zydrine market. That just leaves us with the Morphite market that is pretty stable at an above average pace. The reason this is different from all the other minerals is usually because it is tied to the Tech 2 economy. I think this is the situation at the moment as well. 12,300 for the sellers and 11,600 for the buyers. It's also, I think, the rarest mineral out there, so right now it is trading well above average. If you still have investments from, let's say, 8 or 10 months ago where you bought this stuff for like 7,000 ISK, this is still a great time to sell. Morphite is very expensive at the moment. And that means we get to move to the PI segment, 1755. Let's take a look at these. Basically, this market is in a difficult spot for most of these goods in the last couple of weeks, in fact in the last couple of months, but the pattern has been that there's been less demand than is needed, and so we've been trading below average. Broadcast nodes was a little bit of an exception. It basically is super flat. This is a chart that has hardly any volatility. 2 million, basically 2.1 million on the high side, and maybe going down to 1.8 million on a couple of occasions, but that's really it. You can also see when that happens, get a volume spike for recovery, but a complete decimation of the volumes as well on the days that this goes down. So it's very difficult to actually take advantage of these dips as well. Super stable, basically, these broadcast nodes around 2 million, and we're talking 2.3 million for most sellers, but one is trying to come in here at just shy of 2.1 million, and the buyers are right on that 2 million range. So this is really something that is, it might look a little bit jaggedy and volatile, but it's actually super stable. 2 million broadcast nodes, that's been the situation for pretty much the entire year. In the construction blocks market, we do see that fall dip here that brought us to a low point of 8,000 disk, and now for the first time our 5-day moving average is finally back at that 11,000 disk range. This is what I was talking about last couple of months, trading well below average, trying to recover but constantly failing, falling back to that 9,000 range on the low end. Here for the first time in a couple of months we're back on our averages. 11,800 for the sellers, 10,900 for the buyers. Still, I think a slightly, no, actually 800,000 disk, a normal margin as well. We are back finally on our average price for the construction blocks. If you managed to grab some of these for less than 9,000 disk, which was entirely possible in early fall, then this is a time that you could sell. It's not at a high point or anything like that, but keep in mind here as well, in the construction block market, we clearly see we don't have that much volatility. 12k and a bit above that seems to be the high point. 11,800 for the sellers is really not that bad. Consumer electronics next. This one is still not out of the woodwork. You can clearly see that same thing. Normal price 12,500, quite a bit more volatility, so speculation on this can yield better results. 14,000 on the high points, but again, that fall slump here going down to 10,000 disk at the low points, and we're slowly trying, I would say, to recover here as well, but we're nowhere near where we should be. 12,900 though for the sellers, really trying to get there, but it's the lack of demand that's keeping the average prices well away from this range. 10,400, what a difference between sellers and buyers. Compare that to the construction block, that's 800,000 disk. This is 2,500 disk pretty much in difference. That's like 10%, more than 10% on the buyer's price. That is a very large margin, and the reason why the average prices are just not recovering. After that, we've got coolants. That one is recovering, getting back to 14,000 disk as well. Also one that basically had a low point in June. This is tied to fuels. It's got that more stability. It is slightly different. 14,200 for most sellers. That's not bad. Someone wants to get rid of these. 13,500, and then we've got 12,500 for the buyers. What is notable here, again, that really large margin, that big difference between the sell price and the lowest sell price and the highest buy price. That is still the case. That shows that there's, despite the fact that coolants is doing very well on the sell price, that it's difficult to actually get that price for these goods because of the lack of demand. Cryoprotectant solutions are one exception. This is a CCP intervention. It was suggested from a viewer that I would add this to the mix, and this is the main reason. You have a very stable product that is usually going for 100,000 disk, 220,000 disk, something like that. Then you get this incredible December spike up to 180 because CCP introduces a new item to the game that requires these cryoprotectant solutions. You can never know beforehand exactly what happens, so taking advantage of that is very difficult, but you can see the potential margin here was about 80% in profit at the high point, and we're still trading this for 140,000 for the sellers, 122,000 for the buyers. So there's definitely an increased floor for the low points of this price now, because of the extra demand from this new item, the implant set for the triglavian weapon systems, which is not that good for PvE as it turns out. After that, we've got our enriched uranium market. Same pattern yet again. I was saying this was definitely something that was recurring. October, you can see the hesitation here, 14k, then the slump happens in November down to 12,500, 13,000 disks, something like that. And at the tail end, we are finally recovering. I'd put the average price at 14,500. Sellers are at 14,500 for the first one, 15,000 for the next one, and then the buyers are at 13,500. Still a little bit large for the margin, which is why This is just, such a weird chart right here at the tail end. Are there more sellers outside of Jita? Some, but nothing too dramatic in the player-owned trade hubs. It basically shows that demand is not necessarily picking up, but people are starting to hoard their PI production and waiting for better times, which means that eventually their sell prices go back to an average or even a slightly above average price. But can you get a lot of sales on this one? Well, the volumes are still decent, but it's going to be difficult at this price. We saw in many of these other ones that you get these undercutters, like myself. I'm actually pretty aggressive in my selling as well. That then comes in for 13,900 or something like that, and that's why the chart can quite often stay in this range. Next up, we get our integrity response drones, and this is a bit of a surprise as well. Quite a nice recovery, up to 2.5 million, back to an above average price actually for this one. 2.6 million for the sellers, 2.5 million for the buyers. Look at the volumes here as well. I personally think that this is some market speculation. Someone is preparing for a potential announcement of a new structure. These have, historically speaking, always used advanced PI materials, and so if you want to be ready for that, and also on the introduction, massive spikes, massive profits to be taken here. I think that that's exactly what's happening here for the integrity response drones. Mechanical parts next, tied to fuels, so doing quite a bit better as well. Average price 11.5k or something like that. Sellers are almost there, 11,500, 11,300. Quite a few at 11,900 or 800, so 10,500 to 6 for the buyers. We're still slightly below average, but we're also getting to that recovery, in my opinion. After that, we get our organic mortar applicators, the exact opposite of the integrity response drones. You can see demand dropping off, you can see the lack of volumes here, and as the price is crashing down, this could be very good if you want an investment in this product. 1 million for the sellers, 950,000 is below that for the buyers, so you can definitely grab some organic mortar applicators below 1 million ISK. Look at the rest of the chart, and if a new structure were to be announced, that would be a pretty good purchase. It's definitely a possibility. Robotics stays flat on 90,000 ISK, again showing, I think, that lack of demand. 90k for the sellers, for the buyers, and 96,000 for the buyers. It's these for the sellers, god damn it. It's the buyers that are definitely winning out here. Look at his average price, it's just on that 90,000 ISK range. So this is just the case that, sellers are trying to get 96,000 for robotics. That's still below average, but nobody's moving on this, and then you always have impatient people that just move straight to these buy prices, thus creating this average for robotics. Clearly showing a lack of demand right now and an oversupply situation that is causing this bad price. Self-harmonizing power cores, some more volume increases, creating a spike in the price here. I personally again think that this is speculation on something happening on the CCP front. Almost 2.3 million for the sellers and 2.2 million for the buyers is trading at the higher end of the range right here. Not bad. Superconductors, this is an item that I personally produce, bottoms of 8,750. You can again see that same pattern. Normally 12,500 is should be easily doable. Fall slump here with a bottom in December. And now we are trying to recover, get one seller at 11,150. Most sellers 12,800 ISK, not so bad, but again, lack of demand. Look at the buy prices, 10,500 ISK, that's more than 2,000 ISK in margin between the two. That's like 20% on the buy price. That's way too much, and as a result, our average prices are staying well away from that 12,500 range. Test cultures is our one exception in the category so far, where we basically have a recovery through fall, starting in the summer when we reached the bottom of around 6,000 ISK. That was super cheap for a refined PI material, and now here we're finally in the recovery, and we're talking 10,000 ISK for the sellers, 9,000 ISK to 9,500 ISK for the buyers. It's definitely a more respectable price, but keep in mind most of these refined PI materials go for like 12,500 on average, so this is still an overabundant product, but compared to its performance over the last year, it's definitely in a great place. And then finally we have the wetware mainframes, and this is a pattern that is starting to show up. Look at the volume increases here, and the price is going for a 1-year high point on the wetware mainframes, because over the last year we haven't had any real indications of new structures. So that is why wetware mainframes has basically been very flat, mostly below average, I would say, for its price range. But I think speculation is starting to move in here. 2.5 million for the sellers, 2.4 million for the buyers. Clearly being able to force these buyers up to 2.4 million is pretty damn impressive. This is the volume all of a sudden over 10,000 discs, which is something that we very rarely see, except when we're trying to recover from 1-year low points. So this is quite a trend break all of a sudden. This is the third advanced PI material that has this, in my opinion, speculative increase in price. Very interesting, something that we have to keep in mind when it comes to potential announcements from CCP. Next up, the advanced moon materials coming in at 2910. Let's take a look at these. So yeah, the unexpected volatility but good performance of crystalline carbonate continues after dipping down to 140. I would say 2 times, and then to 145 2 more times. It constantly keeps making its way back to 160. That's not so bad. Right now it's 155 for the sellers, 156 in fact, and 151 for the buyers. So we're in that in-between spot, but it's okay. We're able to defend our average price. I'm actually very surprised by that, because advanced moon materials, you would think with a super stable nullsec at the moment that we would be in a bad spot for that. After that, we've got Fernite Carbide, which here, that's more what we expected. In November, we went down to 1-year low point of 125, but another decently good recovery. 143 for the sellers, 117 for the buyers, though you gotta be careful here. That downwards potential is definitely there, but the sellers are apparently able to dictate the price and demand close to 150 for Fernite Carbide, so it is still doing really well. After that, we have the titanium carbide, which is going for just above 175. Again, that November-December slump down to a low point is a reality. 181 for the sellers, 178 for the buyers. Yeah, still below average, so not doing that great. This is more in line with what I personally expected. And then tungsten carbide was also not doing well, but look at the tail end here. 200 disc on the chart. We're talking 205 for the sellers, 197 for the buyers, forcing those up again. Very impressive. So another recovery in the carbide materials, back to the average price. That is very surprising to me, but very good news, of course, for this market and for the producers and sellers here. Very impressive. Not exactly sure where it comes from. Photonic metamaterials, that one is staying well below average here, probably 15,000, yeah, 16,000 for the sellers, 14,800 for the buyers. That is a below average price, not that great. The plasmonic metamaterials are doing quite well. Are we staying above 20,000 disc? I believe so. 21 for the sellers, 19,500 for the buyers. Average price getting right here, 21,500. So not bad for plasmonic metamaterials. Then we have our non-linears, which is, these are not doing that great, staying well below average. Buyers would be at 21.6. That's pretty narrow margin though, so the market is willing to pay the price for these materials at this point. And then we have the terahertz metamaterials that actually went to a low point and is now at the tail end trying to recover. It is currently selling for 22,500, buyers at 20,000. That's a bit more of a margin. This one is clearly struggling a little bit more from these low points here in, again, fall and the late December periods. So overall, I'm very impressed at how robust the advanced moon materials has been in the last couple of months. You don't really hear that much really destruction happening in nullsec, I would say. So apparently the supply lines are doing quite okay, but we're not so massively oversupplied in all these products that we have charts like these with 1-year low points very clearly defined in the last couple of months. Most of them actually are able to command their yearly average prices right now. We still have some other advanced moon materials like the fermionic condensate staying at 90,000 disc, bit below average, but not that bad to stay here as well. Then we get the ferrogel market. This one is clearly more in line with what I would expect in the current null-sec situation, well below average, constantly struggling, constant pressure on the 5-day moving average chart. That is clearly visible here, and only a bit of a recovery. This is very clearly a spike double to triple the normal amounts, because we reach a 1-year low point of like 33,000 disc, which was of course kind of crazy for a good that normally goes for 45 to 50,000 discs. So here speculators moved and plugged that gap, but look at the pressure, it's right back. So here I would not be surprised if we reach that 35k again, if we see another recovery, but until we break back towards 45,000, we are definitely not in a good spot for ferrogel. Fullerite is also struggling, clearly under pressure here. Low points at this time it was 845, 850, something like that, to keep in mind if you're looking to invest. And then hypersynaptic fibers is actually back above average, 13,300 for the sellers, 13,000 for the buyers. Not bad, so it's definitely not across the board here either. Nano transistors, this was a very unusual situation with actually a well above average price for most of the fall and summer, 6,000 disc on a complete lack of supply, a bit of volatility at the tail end, and even here right now we're pulling back towards a higher price, 5,600 for the sellers, 5,000 for the buyers. So some surprise volatility between a completely supplyless 6,000 disc. That was the reality after the summer, and then now, well, it comes in and then apparently it gets snagged up very quickly. You're definitely able to sell this at a nice premium at the moment. Then we've got the phenolic composites doing really well to stay above 2,000 disc here, so nicely just above average. And then the ceramic fibers is, well, after recovering from a low point here as well, doing okay to hold on to 400 disc, 416 for the sellers, 400 for the first buyer. Not that bad either. I would say that there's clearly pressure in some of these advanced move materials, but it is not uniform across the board, and a surprisingly large amount of these are able to defend their average prices. This leads us to the Tech 2 ship market coming in at 35.25. Let's see what these have in store for us. General vibe here has been oversupply as well, but look at that, Aries dipping below 25 million ISK, and on not that big of a volume spike, we actually have a tradable spike up to the 35 million range. Currently selling for 34.5 million on fresh supply, and then the buyers are up to 31 million all of a sudden. So last week would have been the right time to buy an Aries. You could have probably grabbed these for like 23 million, 24 million, something like that. You already have a 10 million profit on that right now. It's going to be very difficult to get that very best profit here. You can see that the volatility is always quite high, so expect this to get dumped on massively, expect the price to go back down very quickly, but it is great to see this market alive, to see this spike happen, because that is why I keep an eye on the Tech 2 market. It's really one of my favorite places to try quicker trades, to try and make some money in the game, and I quite often actually succeed because this pattern does keep repeating. You reach one point low, speculators completely overshoot, some alliances come in to buy big volumes of it, and then you get this awesome sell opportunity. It is right here for the Aries. If you were smart enough, I was not last week, to buy, then right now you could take a massive profit. After that, we've got the Basilisk here. We've got, well, that pattern, it's a little bit slower on the Basilisk because of the lower volumes, but you can clearly see that bottoms at 200 million can happen, and then spikes up to 300 million, 280 million do happen as well. Here we had one exception to 180 as the bottom, and then going back up to 250. Right now we're back on the downside. Let's see where the buyers are at. That's what's important. 210 for the sellers, 190 for the buyers. Well, honestly, here I'd have more patience. We're clearly going down right now. We've clearly been to a 180 price range. That's what I would wait for personally to jump in on a Basilisk purchase potentially. Cerberus, this is great, right? Look at these bottoms going to 210, now even going to 200 million ISK, and then look at the spikes up to 280 million ISK. This is really pretty damn good. If I'm not mistaken, in. I bought Cerberus. Is it here or is it still here? Yeah, it's still here. I'm too lazy on this. I bought one for 195 million ISK. It's already sellable for 256 million. Definitely not bad. 207 for the buyers. These have been forced up as well. So another trade that you could have made. This was probably about a 1 month trade, which is definitely not bad, I would say, for a 60 million return on a 195 million purchase right here. So Cerberus is also spiking up and in a place to sell from its low point. That was really not that long ago. Love this chart. This is a volatile chart. This is where you can make money and lose a lot of money as well, depending on when you buy and when you sell. As always, we try to buy low and we try to sell high. Another spike here for the Crow as well. Very, very interesting. 27.5 million at the bottom average price. You could have probably grabbed this for 25 million. And here you gotta be a little careful. 29 million is not that much higher. And we're still at 25 million for the buyer. So the Crow also knows 1, 2, 3, 4 nice high spikes. Couple of pronounced low points as well here. But always a bit difficult to trade in the interceptor market, in my opinion. Volumes are not that high. Next up here we get the Eagle. This one lacks volatility, is now slowly making its way back up to 250 million ISK. In fact, it's 240 for the sellers, 220 for the buyers. Why is this so much slower? But the volumes just aren't there. But now I think we're talking about a slow recovery, because the Eagle should find its way back in the meta after the Munin has been nerfed by CCP. So that's why this one is here on a suggestion. So far, honestly, we get a slow recovery back to a 250 million range. We're not even there yet. And the volumes are not really in line with a line ship just yet. So we'll have to see if this can evolve later down the line. Perhaps on some big Nostic action, a couple of Eagle fleets get lost. We need to see those replaced. That's perhaps when we start to see a more interesting Eagle market in Jeddah. Next up, you get the Guardian recovering from a low point. So here we could have bought these last week for well away of 200 million ISK, and we still can. 185 million for the buyers. They are not budging. 210 million for the sellers. They're basically trying to drive the price back up at least a little bit to keep those margins up. But right now it's very difficult to sell these, also to buy these, because we're in that recovery phase, but it's definitely not a sell opportunity. I would say try to grab a Guardian for 185 if you haven't already. It does make a lot of sense, and if I'm not mistaken, I have a Guardian. Is it here? Yeah, which I bought for 180. So I apparently bought this one at the right time before these have been pushed up by another 5 million ISK. The Heretic Interdictors, I mean, I'm keeping them in here because at some point I do think CCP is going to intervene here. These have basically been very low volumes, very unreliable, and the buyers have been able to ask like 60 million and below for most of the year. You can see the lack of supply here as well, despite the fact that, you know, it's an interdictor. It should have its uses. For some reason it just doesn't find that much use right now, and it's kind of terrible. 51 million for the buyers is super low. You can see the volumes 25 and less on a daily basis is really bad for a ship like this, to be honest. And here I have, I think, tried a couple of these long-term investments where I really try to buy at a very low point, but this is not in line with the other Tech 2 ships where I'd love to see some faster returns, which does definitely happen quite a bit more in the interceptors, in the logistics cruisers, and in the stealth bombers. Here for the interdictor, I basically think try to buy for the very lowest price that you can, and then hope for CCP to do a balance pass on the interdictors. It's a different story here for the Hound, for instance. You get that lovely wavy pattern. The averages do go down over the year, which is very interesting. It was usually close to 25 million, 30 million on a normal price, and then spikes up to 40 million. Here we clearly go down to 20 million at the low range, and then a spike towards 35 million is what has been realized. Right now we're back on the downside. 24 million for the sellers, 23 million for the buyers. We're not at that low point just yet. I bought for 22 million on my last trade, but with a little bit of patience, I think it is possible that the hunt will show another buy opportunity. It's already pretty damn low right now, but I personally would have a bit more patience. The Ishtar is also different from all of that volatility because it is a super powerful PvP and PvE platform. It's also something that I think will find its way in Nostic ratting for AFK activities basically, so it's really stable at a pretty damn respectable price. 232 million for the sellers, 215 for the buyers. Pretty narrow margin for such an item, and you can see the amount 100 to 200 a day is definitely doing pretty well. This volatility period here, in my opinion, entirely due to the fact that one of its competition ships, the Vexor Navy issue, was nerfed and turned from a drone ship, which is of course the strength of the Ishtar, to more of a brawling PvP ship. That caused a bit of volatility in the market, but we're basically back on that normal average price. Good demand, good supply, not much to say here. Very difficult, I think, to get trades on this one. Then we get the Manticore market. Here again you get at least some volatility. I always find it a bit difficult to trade in the Manticore because it's got that premium over the other stealth bombers, so you always feel like you're overpaying even when you're buying one for, let's say, 27-28 million. First part of the year was a great purchasing point, but it always felt a little bit more risky. Here we had that slump down to like 22 million, yeah, 22.5, something like that. And now, yeah, it's not the same volatility as what I'm seeing in quite a few of the other stealth bombers. 28 million for the sellers, 25 million for the buyers. 25, no, still too early right now. This is not where I want to jump in. Then we get the Munin, if it wants to load at least. Let's see. Yep, there it is. That is impressive, and man, is being a meta ship actually a curse? I don't know, because this is what we would have expected for the Eagle to happen if that one became meta and the Munin no longer because of its nerf, but now it went to one yellow point of 200 million. I think this was around the announcement and those changes, and look at that lovely recovery. We're currently selling for 240 million ISK. That's not bad. 40 million on a 200 purchase would have been pretty good, and the buyers forced up to 230 as well. Very impressive. The volumes, of course, are not that good, but this is a very nice recovery from the Munin in the last couple of months. This could have been a nice trade. I personally did not jump in because I was expecting the exact opposite. I was expecting the Munin to start to trade on a lower range around 200 million, and I was expecting the Eagle to show that fast recovery and starting to trade in 250 to 300 million range. Unfortunately, that did not happen. Here's the Nemesis, another one, right? Lows 25 million, highs 35 million. You get some nice trade potential. We are definitely moving to a different range at this point. Lows are now 20 million, highs are at 30 million, but this is quite a bit more volatile and quite a bit better. Right now, 27 to 28 million. No, 26 to 27 million, excuse me, for the sellers. Not bad. If you bought these for 22, which you still can, just above that, you already have a nice premium. If you can buy them for like 18 on a real bottom, then you already have a nice small trade to make. For the Oneros, we are back down as well. Last year the low points though can get to 160 million. We're still at 170. Very hesitant on trading in the Oneros as well because of the abysmal volumes compared to the other logistics cruisers. But on a good spike and with good timing, the potential profits here can be pretty huge as well. Then we've got our Purifier market. This is very nice. So here, this is the pattern that we're looking for, of course. Low end 30 million and below, high end 40 million, 45 million, 1, 2, 3, 4. Very pronounced sell opportunities. Then we have our move to a different range. We're going back to a 1 year low point of less than 25 million. Bit of a recovery, but here we go. Landing on 25. Spike up to 40 million. Right now we're selling for 39 million on the Purifier. Buyers are forced up to 32 million. This is where you can definitely try to sell for a very nice profit. And well, we're starting to learn that pattern here as well. 25 million does seem to be a low point, a cutoff point, something to keep in mind. If you can grab Purifiers below that range, you've got a good purchase. After that, we have the Saber, another interdictor, quite a bit more volatility at the tail end, but the buyers are at 62 million and they've been here for most of the year. New supply comes in, we're back at 63. This is basically the pattern. Suppliers get completely tired of this kind of dead market, so nothing comes back in. We managed to make our way to a 70 million range, and then after that happens, suppliers squash everything right back to the buyers, but really these have not moved for most of the year. If you watch the previous EVE talks, you know that this is a very difficult situation, and personally I think only CCP is going to change it. After that we've got the scimitar market, which hasn't that volatility that we want, but when it does happen, you get a spike up to 280 million on a 200 million purchase. That's a very nice profit margin. Again, at the tail end we do see that move to a different range. We're talking 188 for the buyers, and they can probably sometimes test the 180 range, and then the sellers are now going for 214 to 15 million. That's a very big margin, and it's actually a tradable margin, so I think this one is actually in a difficult spot as well. The scimitar, be careful. I would wait for this to drop off to 180 before I would jump in. And then we've got the stiletto that was super stable over the entire month of December, staying just below 30 million. Is finally some change in that one, and it's on the downside. 28 million for the sellers, 26 million for the buyers. Well, if it keeps going, then I think a buy opportunity, let's say that we go below 25 million, could produce itself, but right now it's still too early to tell. So the Tech 2 ship market, super interesting. Stealth bombers, interceptors are showing some nice volatility all of a sudden as well, and then logistics cruisers, my favorite places to look for trade very fast. That's all relative, of course, but I'm talking about a couple of weeks, couple of months at the most, and to get a return on those, that is the category for that for me. This means we move on to the Tech 3 market at 49.40. And this one, well, it looked like it could be very tradable on the oversupply of the last couple of months, but let's see if that one really is over. Last week we had quite a bit of recovery, and we didn't see the volumes needed to call it oversupply anymore. Let's see what's happening now for the Confessor. The chart is getting back to that average or low end of the average range at 37 million. Sellers are at 37 million, buyers are at 33.6 million. 46, still a little bit high, but then 14, 10, and then everything else below 10, this is not oversupplied, it's just a touch too high, which is why we are also a touch below average on our price range. After that we've got the Hecate, you've got that same slump right here on crazy oversupply. All of a sudden we shoot back up to 45 million, and now we're back moving in the normal trade range. 43 million for the sellers, 40 million for the buyers. This is not good news though. 244, 190, another 65. This is too much for the market, but I would not be surprised if this is remnants from the supply dump that we had here. And if the 43 million turns out to be the highest tactical destroyer, it is normal that some dumping happens here. So I wouldn't panic just yet. Let's see what the Jackdaw is doing. 40 million. On the average price, 41 million for the sellers, 27 million for the buyers. This is actually a lot again. 197, 70, 70, 30, 33. That is quite a bit. It's a very good price, but it's, I think, more than what the market can handle. And then let's take a look at the Zwepel, which finally had that recovery up to 40 million as well. 41 million for the sellers, 37 million for the buyers, and this is what you want to see. 19, 28, and then just some small volumes. This is a mixed picture. This honestly is a mixed picture. We've got slow recovery in the Confessor, a decent amount, but nothing too crazy. We've got this Zwepel that's in a prime spot, in fact, very high price for this Zwepel. A lack of supply is clearly there, and then the Hecate and the Jackdaw are actually showing higher volumes than what we want to see. So right now I think we're still in a stabilization phase. I'm hoping that we can basically still chew through these volumes, and these volumes especially for the Hecate, and that we can then find our way back to 40 million pretty much across the board on averages, and see these healthier markets rather than a slump like this on oversupply. So it was very noticeable. This is what happened. Let's see if we can recover and if we can move back to a more healthy trade situation. In the cruiser markets, things were a little bit different in my opinion. We did have slumps as well, but to my surprise, not on increased volumes, but on a complete lack of supply and complete disinterest in the market in general. Right now, supply is doing a little bit better, so we're trading actually below average for the year. 150 million for the sellers of the Legion, 131 for the buyers, but you can clearly see here as well that volumes are not that big. If we keep slumping down, 131 for the buyers, I mean, that's pretty damn low. That's all the way down here. This could be interesting on a bit more supply. See these average prices dive back down, move in on the right part. You can see the potential upswing on this one. But this is a very speculative market because of the super low volumes, so it is risky. At least it feels very risky to me personally. Here we get the Loki actually managing to command an average price of around 180 million. It's 170 for the first seller, 180 for more, 164 for the buyers. That's a bit better. Supply wise, this is definitely not crazy. It's decent. And it's actually pretty normal considering the Loki being the most popular Tech 3 cruiser at the moment. Then we get the Proteus market, yeah, slightly below average, I would say, at around 150. 150 for the sellers, 139 for the buyers. So it's not a bottom just yet, so we're again in an in-between spot. And then the Tengu actually was at 180 when I checked it. New sellers have come in, yeah, 180 for the sellers, 140 for the buyers. That's a very large margin between the two, and you do see some fresh supply coming in for the Tengu, trying to take advantage of that high price. So right now I would say that most of these are actually in a normal range at normal supplies as well. Let's hope that that does mean that the destroyers will normalize in supply as well, and overall, yeah, if you see a very low price, you can of course try to grab some cheap ships on that one, but to get these slumps again, you do need that massive oversupply, and that means that it always feels a little bit more risky. But right now, I would say I'm still in the we are recovering from that camp, and I think that we will end up normalizing as well. Hopefully that means that we can get that same pattern in the cruisers as well, so that these will go back down to low points. Then I think I would make a move on those, because the potential upswing on these 1 year low points is pretty significant, especially if again we're not in an oversupplied situation anymore. This leaves us to the extra product of the week that's coming in at 55.15. And I'm going to take another look at the faction cruisers just to see what these have been doing, and perhaps see if there's anything notable in faction warfare happening, because of course that is what they're tied to. Now we'll start with the pirate factions as always. I'm suspecting that these will not be too high in price. The Ashimu pretty much average 60 million. We don't see anything too notable there except one little spike. Cinnabal slightly above average. This one's going for 164 million for the sellers, 147 million for the buyers, if I'm not mistaken. This was a bit of a rebalance that happened here for the Cinnabal, making it better. Yeah, probably the rapid fire, was it? Something that improved Minmatar weapon systems. I believe that would be the cause of this above average price. Pretty good news of course for the Cinnabal, an amazing looking ship and actually a very strong platform. Then we get the Ortrus. Okay, there is some moves here. Ortrus shooting up to 250 million ISK, slight recovery, but definitely still trading well above the 200 million normal range. 247 to 248 for the sellers, 221 for the buyers. Super powerful platform actually, but now going at a massive premium. If you have some Ortruses lying around and you don't actually use them, you can sell them for a very good price. This is actually my case. I've got the Explotrus that's still gathering dust in the hangar. Haven't used it for a while. We'll see. Maybe I'll try to make some ISK on that. Then we've got the Phantasm that is slightly recovering but staying below average. 79 million for the sellers, 70 million for the buyers. Now this is speculation on my part, but we know that there was a dev blog from Team Talos, and did it have, let's take a quick look at this. Don't we have the faction logo on here somewhere? Let's see, right here it had the faction logo as a hint as to what they were going to look at next. So it could be that the Sasha ships get a rebalance. That means that if we are currently buying at 70 million ISK, you are definitely buying at the low range of the chart. That is not that bad. It's a gamble, admittedly. I myself have been very lucky. I've been exploring in Sasha space, got some BPCs for these, so I'm actually accidentally ready for a rebalance of these ships and potentially some nice profits. But you still can, I think, try to grab some cheap phantasms if you want. Then we get a Stratios. That one is really selling for a very low price, super affordable, great ship as well, alpha friendly, 150 million for the sellers, 142 for the buyers. It's a bit of an oversupply situation right there, 114 as the latest order. So this one is actually at a low point. If you want to speculate on that again, look at that August spike, then you can do it. But what's super noticeable is of course the wavy pattern in these faction cruisers. One big spike in a year. That's completely different from the Tech 2 ship market, where you could see 4 or 5 spikes and slumps in a single year. So that's a big difference there. Then we've got the Gila, very high point as well, just like the Ortros, going up for more than 22 million. Missiles, drones, these are of course very popular ships. Right now 223 for the sellers, 205 for the buyers. Very strong premium. And then we finally have the Vigilant that is going for 170 at the low end there, 175 for the sellers, 158 for the buyers. Definitely below average. So a mixed picture here in the pirate faction cruisers. Ortros and Gila, very, very strong performance. Phantasm at a low point. Could be interesting, of course. Let's see if I turn out to be right in the upcoming weeks. After that, we've got the Navy faction ships left. Here is the Augur Navy issue, Amar. Pretty cheap, definitely below average, selling for 45.5 million. Buyers are at less than 40 million ISK. This should indicate a strong situation for Amar Warfare. And very cheap LP there, so very abundant. Then the Caracal is, well, slightly up in price, though we're not at the bottom anymore, but still definitely at the low end right now. 49 million for the sellers, 44.6 million for the buyers. So unfortunately we're not seeing a turnaround, and so the Executor here a bit more volatile, going for 50 million. Not sure if I'd want to trade too much in that one right now. This should be, in my opinion, a bit above that, let's say on the 60 million range, comparing where the Caracal is, but that's not happening. Omen also slightly up from the bottom, but still trading pretty low. Then the Osprey, same thing, flat, but definitely still pretty cheap. So where are the high points? The site did just go up to 55 million, but is already slumping back down. The Stapper did go up to 60 million, but is already slumping back down. And then the Vexor Navy issue is actually really low as well at 40 million ISK. This is very unusual. Usually you have a more clear picture as to what's happening in faction warfare. You could have something like this Caracal Navy issue at a low point, and then you normally have the Vexor Navy issue at a very high point. This is just not materializing right now. So it really looks like the cruiser market might be a little bit out of whack. Part of that, I've talked about this, touched on this when I was talking about the Ishtar, is the rebalance of the Vexor Navy issue. Of course, used to be one of the strongest, cheapest potential PvE platforms that you could get out there. This turned into a PvP ship. So that one has really decreased its popularity. Massive impact on the entire Navy market, I think, throwing things out of whack. And so I'm reading this as faction warfare is not pronounced in one direction. So it's not like Kaldari or Amar are completely dominating. I'd say they're on the winning hand because LP seems to be cheaper, but it's not super pronounced. And that rebalance of the Vexor Navy issue is throwing things out of whack quite a little bit. So I think next week I'll maybe try to take a look at battleships or the frigates and see if we can get a clearer picture, and potentially, of course, a nice jumping point here. Yeah, that's a no for me. I don't want to buy any of these, speculating that the LP will become more expensive and that will make ISK on the trade, unfortunately. But that's the situation, and that's also it for this Eve Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.